Hey everyone, welcome to Resonate, a BJD podcast. I am Porpita, and I'm here with my fellow co-hosts Avari and Nova. Without further ado, let's introduce ourselves. So I guess we'll start with Avari. So tell me a little bit more about you and the hobby and what got you into ball jointed dolls.
Okay, I guess I go first then.
Yeah.
I'm Avari. I've been in the hobby for I guess roughly 4 years. I'm relatively still a newbie. I like to collect artist dolls. This girl is an artist doll. She's a Tonoja Hana on Dolls on Body with Dodger Doll's head. Yep, that's pretty much about me.
That's cool. So what about you, Nova?
Oh man, what got me into the hobby was probably I used to collect Final Fantasy Play Arts action figures, and then I was just like looking for those on Google one time, and then I stumbled upon ball jointed dolls. It was actually Assume Claus. I think that's how you say it. It was the first one I seen. He's like the one with the crow feet. And I was like, what is this? These are so cool. I gotta know more. And so I just started
Nice.
going down the rabbit hole from there. Been in the
Very,
hobby about 10 years now, and
hmm,
I like to collect MSDs. Mostly I just stick to those.
very cool. And I am Porpita, and I've been in the BJD hobby since 2003 before pretty much like there were any big social media sites. The Yahoo groups that I was active in was a custom house one, which was called The Soul Within. And I joined Den of Angels shortly thereafter, and that's when it first started. So I've been in the hobby for quite a while, and tastes have evolved over the years. Here I have my MSD doll. I primarily collect MSD dolls, but somehow I have a lot of SD dolls now, and I've been trying to get rid of them. So they kind of multiply on their own. And this is one of my favorite dolls. Probably the favorite is she's a dim head with a Leia, I guess depends how you pronounce it, with the half closed eyes. And I made her clothes, and we could talk more about some of the artistry involved in the doll hobby. But I know that we've introduced our dolls except you, Nova. So how about you tell us a little bit more about your doll?
Oh yeah, I totally forgot. She is a Minifee Hawaii, the vampire elf version.
hmm
She's pretty cool. I've had her for about, oh gosh, 2 years now. I love Minifees mostly. I
Very
have
cool.
a lot
Very
of other dolls as well though.
I'm sure
Is
we'll
she in
get to
white skin?
that.
Is she a minifee in white skin?
Yeah, yeah, she's totally in the white skin, like the paper white skin that they come out with. She's mellowed
Just really
slightly, but not
paper
much.
Very cool. Awesome. So I guess let's talk a little bit about like what the purpose of this podcast is about. I know that we've talked about it since, we started our own little chats on Instagram, and perhaps to fill in the void of just having a place where we can just kind of chill with friends and just talk about dolls. So I guess like what got you interested in doing this? So whoever wants to chime in, please feel free to join in the convo.
I really just there's no real reason why I wanted to do this. I just kind of I always have issues speaking with other people or just issues speaking about my dolls in general. So I feel like this would be kind of help me getting through that. I am very awkward right now. uh, yeah, so I hope by I don't know, the third episode it would get a little bit better. I can talk more comfortably on screen or hopefully in person too.
Great. What about you, Nova?
Oh man, I've always sort of wanted to do BJV. I can say it, BJD videos, but I've just kind of always felt awkward talking to just the camera. I'm having a cat disaster. Oh, she's kicking around.
It's all good. We can have special guest appearances.
Oh yeah, kitties. Yeah, I always felt kind of awkward just talking to the camera by itself. So I think an environment where there's other people to converse with is great.
I feel
Definitely.
like it's easier for me to just talk to the camera and not the real person. Like real people freak me out a little bit.
Well,
Just a
it'll
little
be okay. It'll be okay though. It'll be okay. So I think it would be good just to have like a podcast or podcast slash video about ball jointed dolls for people who are new in the hobby or just want a little bit more engagement when it comes to just talking about the hobby. I always see online how people don't really have a lot of friends, so hopefully we can meet some new people, new collectors through this. And I guess
bit.
from the very beginning, let's talk about what is a ball jointed doll. And weirdly enough, I feel like the definition is probably contentious with some people, but at its very core, a ball jointed doll is a doll that has ball joints and is strung up with some sort of elastic or string, whatever you want to call it. So I know on Den of Angels they have a more specific definition, but depending on other groups that you're in, it's a little bit more relaxed. So for our
Mhm.
intents and purposes, I'm pretty chill with it. I don't know. I always see the hinge joint argument come up a lot, and for me, I feel like if it's not like, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Like, I feel like when we talk about ball jointed dolls, that seems to be a weirdly controversial topic. So, what are your thoughts? Like, I'm
Honestly,
not.
I feel like hinge joints shouldn't be counted as ball jointed because obviously it has like a very different system. I have had hinge jointed once, and it's really not the same. It's really not the same, but it's not like it's worse or better than ball jointed. I just think it's not too different. It's that they are two different things, and they should be included as under like an umbrella called BJDs. But like apparently a lot of people have like problem with me saying that. They say that like sometimes when this topic comes up and I say what I think that hinge jointers shouldn't be included in ball jointed, they kind of not really liking the idea. I don't know why.
Mhm.
A lot of people think when BGD collectors say that hinge jointed aren't BGD, they looking down upon plastic dolls, and just that's just not the case.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like I feel like with hinge jointed dolls, like because they could have ball joints, but they are different from just being strung up, like where
Hmm.
you can just kind of like pull the arm and everything. I mean, clearly I have a case of dolls that have a hinge joint to some degree, like the ones on Leica bodies at least. But I do feel like it's slightly different. And I agree, it's not like your doll is worse or crappier or whatever, anything negative.
Yeah,
It's just different, right? It's just different. And
exactly.
yeah, and there's no better or worse doll. I think at the end of the day, a hobby is a hobby. Whatever you enjoy collecting, that's what you should be happy about collecting, not trying
Yeah,
to, convince other people that your doll is just the same or better. I don't know. I feel like that would really suck the joy out of any hobby if I had to do that.
it really
When I
does, and it feels like that's just what's happening in this hobby in general.
when I think of hinge jointed though, what comes to mind is like smart dolls or Dolphy Dreams, and I totally do see those as kind of a part of the ball jointed doll hobby in a way. So I mean, those are the ones I think of. I'm not sure which other types there are, but those are definitely, I think, qualified as
Right.
under the umbrella term of BJD, even though they're not strung with elastic.
Yeah, that's fair.
Hmm.
That's a fair assessment. I think because like back then when Den of Angels was kind of defining what could be in the forum, there really weren't that many options. So dolls like the Obitsu bodies and the Dolphy Dreams, those were allowed, kind of grandfathered in. So I can definitely see similar aesthetics, close sharing, size, and all that. So I kind of see like by definition and time, they kind of got like ushered in,
Yeah,
and I'm okay with that too. It's not something I lose sleep over.
really, it's not.
Yeah. So that's, I guess, a very high level definition of like what we perceive ball jointed dolls to be. But I think like the fact that most of them, minus some of the dolls that we had talked about, are primarily hand, not necessarily hand sculpted, but they are sculpted whether digitally
Mhm.
or by hand using traditional media, and then afterwards molds are made of them and then they're cast in resin. So I think the like big I don't know, separator, defining term would be it's made out of resin, but I know there's always exceptions to that rule. But typically you'll find a ball jointed doll to be a doll with ball joints strung with elastic and predominantly made of resin. Okay, so now that we have that, do you guys have anything to add to it, or pretty much kind of
I
it's what
think
it
that describes them pretty
is?
well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for ball jointed dolls. Hi, Nugget.
I see.
My cat
Guest
left me.
kitty. Guest kitty. Mine is sleeping on the sofa. So yeah, let's. I guess the next thing we can talk about is like, what do people do with their dolls? Because I think one thing that I do see in a lot of like online groups or Instagram, any social media really, is that there's a lot of guilt with doll spending. What do you do with them? They just kind of sit around and are statues. Like, is that the case for you?
Well, in the case for
Uh,
me, I like to paint them, so I do my own face ups and stuff, and so Each time I get one, I see it as a new canvas to work on. I do have some that are factory face-ups and stuff, just because I really liked them. But if I can, I like to get them blank and paint them. So I definitely consider that an aspect of something I do with them.
Yeah, I don't do much with them to be honest. Like I like taking photos of them because to me they are much easier to take photo of rather than human than taking photo of human. I just like I like how customizable they are, even though I'm not the one who's customizing them.
Yeah, for me, I like making wigs. Like this wig on my dim doll, I made it. I made it for her, and then I've learned how to like process my own fiber. But sometimes I love to buy from artists to actually clean the fiber, and then afterwards just jump into wig making. But I also do sewing as well, and I made this outfit not necessarily for her, but she's wearing it right now. So for me, I tend to like the sewing component as well as the wig making aspect. Like you guys, I don't really do the well, not like you guys because I know Nova paints, but
Mhm.
like Haley, I don't really do any of the aesthetics work myself. At least with my dim doll here, she is painted by a Russian artist who I don't think she's on Etsy anymore. So for me, it's usually like the face up if it speaks well, or I go to my favorite face up artist that I like working with, and then having the doll, but then making all of their accessories and things like that. So that's where I get a lot of joy from the hobby. But I know that we've talked about like meetups. Have you guys ever been to a meetup?
Oh
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I've been to a lot.
Share experience.
Oh man,
I've
my
been to.
first meetup
Oh,
was
sorry, no
actually.
wait.
You can go ahead if you want.
Oh, no, no, you go.
All right. Yeah, my first meetup was actually at Denver Doll Emporium. They were having a small meetup in Colorado, and I thought it was cool that they were doing it inside of the shop because the shop's actually pretty tiny, but it was a tiny meetup itself. There was about 13 people. That was really fun.
Wow, that's awesome. How far are you from Denver, doll?
Oh gosh, I live about an hour and a half from it right
Oh
now.
wow.
Thought I lived a lot closer though.
Oh, okay, okay, that makes sense. That's cool. Pre Corona meetups. What about you, Avari?
Uh, I've been to like a few like Toronto meetup. It wasn't at a specific area. We just kind of choose random spot in the city. We just go and sit there with our dolls talking, maybe sometime eating. Yeah, most of the time it's just like a few people came actually, like around 20 people came, and I know one of them came from all the way from the US. So
Wow.
that was always fun, but it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I think for me, I went to a meetup many, many years ago, probably over a decade ago, and then I met somebody separately, and who lived in my area at the time, and it's hard to coordinate people trying to commit and go out. And the first meetup I went to, it was awkward. And looking back on it, I think it's weird because I went on Den of Angels. They were coordinating it, and it was at a restaurant, which I think is a little bit awkward because everyone's there ordering food, and then you kind of have your dolls out. But like, if you don't know anybody, you're kind of sitting there
I
awkwardly.
got
And
you.
for me, yeah, I know I was like, okay. And then the awkwardness kind of like kills a part of me on the inside. So then I go into like my networking at work mode, which I don't necessarily like, but that's part of like what you're supposed to do, right? And trying to like interact with other people. But overall, I felt like I was the only one kind of doing that, and I was like, wow, this is just awkward because I would ask questions and then people would respond, and then afterwards like that's it, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
should I say something? Like, should I ask more questions? But then it ends up being like, I guess you're a cop, and then you're interrogating a suspect. So I was like, I didn't want to do that either. But then I was like, okay, this wasn't for me. I felt really uncomfortable, and I don't know, people seem to know each other. I felt like the odd man out. So I never went to another one. And I remember I mentioned that in the forum, somebody there who was like pretty nice. She said, well, it looked like you enjoyed yourself. And I was like, did it? I really did it. So yeah, that was when I was a lot younger too. And I think if I went to a meetup again, it would be a little bit better. I've gone to some other meetups that were not ball jointed dolls, but weirdly enough, the collectors also did collect BJDs. But it was like a pull up meetup, and we brought all sorts of other dolls, and it was great. I had a good time. I met one of my best doll friends through it, who maybe can join us on the show later. But it was a better experience, and I think being older helped. But the first one, I was like, it was kind of traumatic. A little bit traumatic.
I feel like everyone's first meeting always like that. Like my first time going to the meeting was also really awkward because I didn't know anyone. I actually went with Joko. Yeah, because we met in person before, so I just kind of went. We went to that place. Everyone was ordering food, and we just kind of sit there like, oh, what are we gonna do? I'm so afraid of my dolls getting dirty and all that because that was my first doll. I was like very particular about her. Like I used to handle these dolls wearing gloves. So that's how much I was afraid of getting them dirty.
Yeah, I feel like a dinner or like a lunch environment for a meetup is a little bit awkward. And when I went to that pull-up meetup, I didn't we, somebody else, and I just showed up. They coordinated at a library. So it
Oh,
was
nice.
free to rent the space, yeah. And no food. So I think that you could have brought like nice light snacks, but we did it at a time where people wouldn't typically be hungry. And then
Mhm.
went over some of the stuff like customizing, and we got to see people's dolls because I never saw one in person. So I think those tend to be a little bit better because I know in I live in Houston, in the Houston area, they do have a group, but I'm not really comfortable going to people's houses that I don't know. So I think a public setting is usually right. The first time I'm like, "What's your friends?" Sure, but until then, I think it's awkward. I'm like driving, pulling up to a house and thinking, "Is this the right house?" And then you're in their house, and I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it's weird. Other people don't seem to think it's weird. Maybe it's me, but I feel like it's kind of a little bit weird.
Oh yeah, I've
It's weird for
totally
me.
had house meetings and I have felt that. But
Like
I know the ones
I
I
wouldn't
went to
be
were
able
fun.
to. Sorry. So I wouldn't be able to like host the meet in my house because I really like I'm a little weird about my house. I'm like if I don't know you, I don't want you in there. I guess it's like different for other people, but I'm just a little. I need my space.
For sure. And if you're a host, it's also very difficult to tell people like, "Hey, it's time for you guys to leave." So I think the best meetup is usually one in a public space where probably there isn't food, and then people can actually
Yeah.
talk, right? Not worry about food spilling on their dolls like clothes or getting things messy. And it's a little bit disruptive if you don't have like a room because then everybody in the restaurant's kind of looking at you. And I think a lot of people don't want that because, dolls kind of are stigmatized, right? They're like weird doll people, which for me, I'm like, whatever. But I know that some people are a little bit more self conscious than I am about things like that. So you don't want
Oh
to be
yeah,
the
I've
center
gotten
of
some
unwanted.
interesting passerby looks from people. Oh, you can hear my cat scattering down the stairs. They're hyper right now. But yeah, I've gotten some pretty interesting looks out in public with my dolls just from random strangers while I was at meetups and stuff. No
Oh
one's
my god.
ever said anything rude, but I have been like, oh man, what is that thing she's holding?
Yeah, for I feel that way too because like I like to take my dolls out to like a really big park near my place and I just like taking their photos there. And a lot of people just walk by and stare at me, just taking photo of this plastic little doll. It's just staring at the tree stump and be like, take a photo of it.
Mhm, for sure.
People
And
would definitely be out.
yeah, like it's weird because I think I've got a lot more comfortable photographing dolls in public because I also collect Blythe dolls pretty actively. And I've had weird stares, but somehow I just don't care anymore. After you hit
Yeah,
a
there
certain
comes to a
threshold,
point where you just quit caring for
Oh
sure.
yeah, definitely.
yeah. And with ball jointed dolls, I would like to travel more with them, but I think I get more stressed out about their face ups, like chipping, which is weird because I have custom Blythes that also have MSC and pastels on their face and acrylic, but I'm not as worried. I don't know why. It's like the same thing, but probably because they're also smaller. But and once you hit the threshold of that, you'll become really comfortable and you just don't really care what other people think. So,
Yeah. Yeah, at this point, I don't care what other people think anymore. I'm just like, okay, I have a doll, but it's also a piece of art, so don't come at me with this.
right, exactly.
Well, that would be my reply too if anyone ever did ask any weird questions, which no one ever has. Some people have commented that they were really cool, but I would just reply,
Yeah.
"It's an art project. Go away. Enjoy your
Yeah.
art. Let me art."
Yeah, if that gets people away and leave you alone. I know that when I was in Minnesota for BlytheCon, I had my Blythe at the Arboretum, and people are like, "Man, I wish I did the elf in the shelf thing. Like that'd be so clever." And I was like, "Okay." I'm like, "That's cool." So it's I guess less weird now, more acceptable. So
Oh
you're not
yeah.
hurting anybody, but yeah. So on that topic, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about price point, especially for those people who are new to the hobby and would like to be involved, but they're like, oh man, ball jointed dolls are so expensive. And it will probably segue into a discussion about the dreaded R word,
Oh man.
recast. So I guess when it comes to like talking about how much dolls cost, how would you explain that to somebody who's like, oh man, I'm really interested in ball jointed dolls, but oh, they're so expensive.
I mean,
Is
I
that
bought
really?
most of mine on layaway.
Oh, sorry. No, but you go. You go.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layaway options now that there wasn't in the past. So when the hobby first started, you kind of had to just pony up all the money. And now you can actually kind of just do smaller payments and chip it away. So it makes it a lot more doable.
What were you
Yeah, I
saying,
feel like
Ryan?
if you are interested in getting a doll, I say check the secondhand market, but definitely do your research first. That's what I did for my first doll. She was a Sophia yeast, yeah, yeast doll. I don't know how to say her name. Yeah, she was like a secondhand doll I bought from on Instagram. I lurked that hashtag BJD sale for like so long. So I actually springed my money. I saved up my money after like my first job, and I was like, you know what? She's within the price range. I like her. I like how she looks. I'll get her. And basically, saving is your friend. Just do a lot of saving.
And I think like so since I was in the hobby like really early on, like the SDs, they were typically like at least $500. And that's like the base model. That's how much Custom House had their SD line DI. That's how much they cost. And they only went up from then, from there. And with the MSD sizes were probably like $300 plus, which is still kind of expensive. And back then, nobody took layaway. It was you had the money and then you would buy the doll. And it wasn't until later did there was a shift in like financing that people were willing and more open to accepting layaway, which
Yeah.
before it to me blew my mind when I saw that because I couldn't believe it. I was like, really? I was like, wow, you can buy like a lot of dolls with that. That being said, I think one thing that people need to be careful of is that when you're looking for a doll, especially with a dealer that does offer layaway, you want to make sure you don't fall into the pattern of buying multiple dolls on layaway because quickly it can add up to like a car payment, right? Or even more.
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah. Actually, I've seen so many people done that, like especially newbies. Like I'm sorry, I have to call you newbies. I don't know what else to say. So I hope you don't get offended by that. But yeah,
You're
like
good,
a
man.
lot of people who are new to the hobby, they got into the whole layaway thing, and then they're like, "Oh my god, I can get so many dolls and pay so little every month." And I've seen so many people just like having to sell their layaway to other people because they simply can't afford it anymore. Like it's a really big trap that everyone just gets sucked in.
Do you have anything to add, Nova, about that? I mean, how often have you bought dolls on layaway or your experience with that?
Oh man, the most I've ever had on layaway once was $3, and it was a little tricky to juggle, but I managed. I
Yeah,
learned not to do that. I never put like 1 to 2 on layaway now, but I
For
have
sure.
one on layaway right now.
I think,
who's that?
oh yeah, who's that?
Oh, it's the new ring doll boy. I forgot his name.
Oh
Is
yeah, yeah.
Inu
The
Quack or something.
Inuyasha one,
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
I
really
just
does.
waiting for
Look like
him.
yeah.
for sure. Do you have any layaways going on, Avari? You have
Yes.
one. I know you do have at least one because I enabled you.
See, I I have the G0 girl on
Mm.
layaway. That's a long layaway. And I think I have another one, but I don't really remember who I
It's a
bought.
Lily Cat doll.
Yes,
I enabled you on that.
that's what you enable. Oh, that talking about that, I should pay.
Yeah, check. Make
Say,
sure you don't miss that payment because Rochelle does not allow. Like, well, no, she will. She's pretty good with layaways, but like, you don't want to not
you
pay.
don't want to like make a bad impression on her.
Right. And for me, I have Dora on layaway as well as Lily Cat Charlie on layaway. So I might pay the Charlie off soon just because she's already made. And typically I do layaways for dolls that take like at least 6 months to produce, because why give everything up front when the doll's not ready? So
Yeah,
those are my two
exactly.
layaways. But yeah, so I think that's a good thing that, we can talk about more in another future episode about at least financial security in ball jointed dolls, because I feel like sometimes perhaps it appeals to a certain subset of people, but I felt like for me as a collector, I tend to get kind of impulsive about a lot of things. And it really requires a lot of self-control to also not jeopardize any financial security I might have established for myself just because there's like a new high to chase. So I
Uh,
think we can talk more about that later. But do you guys have anything to add on to that before we switch gears a
I
little
feel
bit?
I feel like finance should be a part of like the newbie experience for everyone who's new to the hobby because it actually plays such an important role because the whole layaway thing that's happening. Like you should really focus on your finance first before you get a doll. Like, but that's for future episode. That's so far away.
Definitely. And I think we're all aligned in that philosophy, is that, you know, put put your responsibility first before it comes to what essentially is a luxury hobby, right? And
Yeah.
one thing that I've noticed about being in the hobby for such a long time is that you'll always find something to buy. It's not like there will be
Yeah.
a shortage of things to buy, because I think I want more things now than I did before, and there's always going to be something new and shiny to like fall in love with and buy.
How about the phenomenon of when you have money to buy something, there's never anything cool for sale, but then when you're
Yeah.
broke, there's all these cool things to buy suddenly?
Right?
It's
Yeah.
Love
actually
that phenomenon.
happened. I'm just like, how do you even do that? Like, I have money. I want to give you money. There's nothing you have to offer. But when I no longer have money, I when I buy something else immediately, like a company is like, hey, look at this new cool doll that we just made.
Yeah, suddenly there's like 5 awesome releases and you're like, "Why?" Yeah, I've
Exactly.
totally had that happen.
But so one thing that I've noticed is that um, spring and summer is always a good time to sell. But typically,
Mm.
as the holidays approach, people are like, "Well, I need money for Christmas," and I'm like, "Why are there so many dolls?" I'm like,
Yeah,
like the
for
good ones
sure.
come up around the holidays, and I noticed that with Blythe too. So I'm like, should I save my pennies until the holidays? I don't know.
It's a holiday shopping for yourself.
Pretty much, yeah. So, with that, let's go and talk about recasts. So, I know recasts tend to be really tempting for people who've never seen a doll and want to actually see it in person and touch it before they realize, like, oh, before I want to spend a little bit more money or wait to see this doll. Like, for me, since I've been in the hobby for such a long time, the thought of buying a recast has never really crossed my mind. I mean, I guess the price point is appealing, but it's
Mm.
not something that was around when I was in the hobby. So for me, I would never change my buying habits for that. But I know you guys joined a little bit later when they became a little bit more prevalent. So what are your thoughts about that?
It
Well, when
kind
I
of baffles.
we
Oh,
always
I'm sorry. We
when I
always do
first
this.
when I first joined, Recast didn't exist. They kind of came out about 4 or 5ish years after, and I think it was kind of the in between spot where layaways weren't really happening and they were just hard to acquire. So that could have been why they rose in popularity. But I sort of think that now that layaway is available and there's a lot of companies that will work with you, that it seems like less of an appeal to me.
Hmm. Like it actually baffled me that li- layaway, no, not that recast used to not be a thing. That's really weird to know because like when I researched the hobby, the first thing that came up is recast.
Wow.
Like it's actually scary how much there are. Like if you just look up BJD immediately on Google, they showing you like recast. I wasn't like tempted by it, but it was more like, oh, I didn't know what recast was. So I looked into it, and obviously the whole thing about it is that, oh, it's a copy of something else. So I
They
was
sure
like,
don't give
okay,
you much hint about it on the website either that it's a fake doll. Like they don't say that anywhere.
yeah.
Mhm.
Like I guess it's more affecting the companies a lot more now than 3 years ago. Like before that, yeah, 3 years ago, I was looking that up. I was researching that, and the company website never have anything about recast. They were just like, it's like they didn't even acknowledge recast until like last year. So everyone's starting to like, oh, recast is bad, and like all the companies are now struggling with this whole thing because everyone buys. And it's rough.
Yeah, and I think I didn't realize that it wasn't a thing 10 years ago, Nova. So my mistake about that. But I think that's interesting because because I've been in and out of the hobby for a while too. Like I wasn't active the entire time since 2003. So I missed like some of the peak things where recast became a thing. So I think it's interesting that you were around for that. And then Avari was around like when they were in full blown, and that was the first thing that she had
Yeah.
seen. So it's like, what? And I think like I feel like sometimes, like with people, when it comes to recast, because we recently had it happen where somebody was selling some Doll Chateau dolls that were recasted, but she didn't know about them. And then we had, one of our friends ask about it. And then some other people who, I can appreciate the stance on being, pro artist and legit, because all three of us are, kind of went for their throat. But it was truly a mistake because, like you said, Avari, when it came to buying her dolls, she had no idea. It's not like the site would ever say, "Hey, you're buying a counterfeit product. This isn't real." Like, but buy it from us because we're selling fake items. Like, there is, I think, a gap of knowledge, and the fact that we see people talk about recasts, but then you want to ask questions about it, right? Because I've Googled it and we've seen that, like, what a recast is, but I feel like oftentimes that information comes at you very one sided, that someone's talking at you. And other people, especially new people in the hobby, they want to have some sort of engagement where they can, ask somebody, like, well, what is a recast? Why should I care about them? I mean, it's cheaper. And I always see like arguments like, oh, it has better customer service. I mean, really? I don't think that's the best excuse for defending a recast, but I think
Actually,
not knowing, is a huge part. But go on.
I'm sorry. I actually remember seeing a YouTube video of this person, this woman. She was like opening a recast Fairyland doll. It has like wings and everything. I guess it was Lucy Wen. I'm not really sure about that. I don't remember much about it, but she was like comparing the two, the doll the legit doll she has and the recast doll she had, and she was kind of like, oh yeah, it's for some reason the recast has like much better quality, and at that point I was just like, I don't know what to feel about that. I don't know how to feel about that because like at one point, like on one hand, a lot of people are saying recast means it's really low quality, it's a copy, and yet on YouTube, someone got a free doll and she's like praising this recast. So at that point, I was like, okay, this hobby is definitely not just as simple as just dolls. Like recasters are actually really out there trying to get their name on the hobby, and I still don't know how to feel about that.
I mean, I heard a rumor, I don't know the truth of it, that Luo actually used to work for a doll company and he got fired and that's when he opened his own. So he probably has experience, but I mean, I've also heard bad things about the recast, like the smell, which I can't confirm either, and
Oh,
I've also
pretty
heard that
bad.
they yellow faster than an actual doll.
Right. And I think it's always hard because it's such a contentious point in the hobby that, people with recast dolls want to be seen as valid collectors. Whereas, but to me, it's interesting that some people find, I guess, some hurtness, that they're slightly hurt that they're not accepted, because I know like garage kits and anime figures, like there is also a stance that don't buy counterfeit, statues, figurines, whatever. So I don't know why it's so contentious in the ball jointed doll hobby, compared to others, and maybe it is there, but everything that I see is discouraging people to buy counterfeit dolls just because, number one, the sculptor and the doll company, it hurts them and their bottom line as well. But also, when it comes to resale value, that's something that I like in hobbies, is that I can at least get close to what I paid, if not break even, when it comes to, like, the things I buy. And when you do that with the recast, I guess you could get some money back, but I feel like you kind of shut the door on that because most people aren't looking for a recasted doll. and they wanted resin to experiment with. You can just, mix your own resin batch. So I don't, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around it, but for people who do have recasts and want to, go legit, I'm totally okay with that. And whatever they do with their dolls, it's up to them, the recasted dolls. But I think hopefully there can be more open discourse versus like mudslinging and saying, oh, you're a fake collector. You can't ever, change or, be a legit collector because you've had them in the past. And personally speaking, I think when I first encountered all of this, I think I was a little bit harder to like forgive, loosely saying that. But like after, that incident that happened recently, I can see that, there are people who are trying to be better and we should give them the opportunity to do that. So those are my thoughts. But I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that or anything else.
No, I agree with you. Like, it doesn't. Sure, like people make mistakes. Like maybe someone like bought recast in the past and now they want to go legit. Like, I'm all for that. Send out a message if you want help for that. Like, sure. I don't think most people are gonna be like shitting on you for used to own the recast. But like, I do know that this hobby kind of have like a habit of witch hunting, which is kind of toxic. Not gonna lie. And they used to dig up the past of a person who's just like, oh, they used to all recast, so they must be like not trustworthy. I don't think that's true. Like the forgiveness in this hobby is very low, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have to agree
Yeah.
with you on that. Nova, do you want to add anything to that?
I agree with that too, that the hobby does seem pretty unforgiving, but I do think that when people want to start going legit, they should get a chance because when you think about it, the cost of a recast is about the cost of one layaway payment. So, I mean, if you can muster up
True.
to buy the recast, you could probably muster up to find a good layaway and work with somebody on buying a
Right.
legit one.
I think so. And especially if you decide that the doll comes and you're not in love with it for whatever reason, you would definitely be able to sell it because you just had it for like what, like a week and you're like, yeah, it's not working out. I'm selling this doll. But I kind of have to agree with you on that. I tend to not be too active in a lot of online BJD communities just because I feel like I'm a little bit too old for them because it's just like the arguments and everything that seem to go on in some of them. I don't have the time or energy to really get there. I just rather, hang out with people who are chill, want to talk about dolls, kind of like what we have with our like, friend circle. And it's really relaxed. And, even when it comes to educating people who might have recasts, like it's not like a witch hunt. And provided that they're not trying to sell their dolls as legit dolls, then I'm definitely, you know, in support of that, like, an education of, I guess, education. And I don't want to say forgiveness, but like, hey, they should have a chance to, actively be in the hobby as a legit collector.
Yeah, I
So,
feel like if we talk more
mhm.
about this recast thing, that's gonna take forever.
Oh yeah.
That's a whole different episode.
Yeah, and I think in future episodes, because we've talked about it, all three of us together, is that if anyone has any, topics that they'd be interested in, or what topics specifically about like recast or whatever it is, feel free to leave them in the comments or pitch them to us. We're definitely open to talk about them on, this new podcast. So we're kind
Yeah,
of
same.
running towards the end of it, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to pass it on to you guys as well. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
Uh, no, not really. Send in your questions. If we can answer it, we will.
What about you, Nova? Do you have anything else?
No.
Okay, great. So this is pretty much the first episode of Resonate, and we will have a second episode coming up for you soon. We're gonna probably finalize the release schedule of what works best for everybody, but stay tuned. There's more to come. So thank you guys for watching and actively participating, I guess, by like watching. And we'll see you next time. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.